Europe in the 1780s was a powder keg. From the fetid streets of Paris to the gilded halls of Versailles, an aroma of perfume and revolution hung in the air. It was an era of contradictions, where the cold logic of the Enlightenment collided head-on with a desperate hunger for the supernatural. The aristocracy, bored with reason, yearned for mystery, for something that money couldn't buy and that science couldn't explain. And it was in this vacuum of desire that he emerged. A man who called himself Count Alessandro di Cagliostro. His arrival was not announced by trumpets, but by whispers that spread like wildfire. He appeared first in the smaller salons of London, and then, with astonishing confidence, in the most exclusive circles of Paris. No one knew his true origins, and that was precisely his greatest weapon. Mystery was his cloak. He was a blank canvas upon which the nobility, desperate for fantasy, could project their wildest dreams. Cagliostro cultivated this ambiguity with the skill of a master. His eyes, described as dark and penetrating, seemed to hold secrets from ages past. He did not assert his immortality directly. He hinted at it. He spoke casually of conversations with Plato, of having been present at the crucifixion of Christ, of having learned the secrets of alchemy in the underground temples of Egypt. He claimed to have been born in the shadows of the pyramids, initiated into the mysteries of Isis and Osiris. He was not merely a man, he was a living myth, and in a society that was about to devour itself, a myth was a feast. He promised the impossible, a cure for the incurable, contact with the dead, and the ultimate prize, the elixir of eternal life. The nobles did not see a charlatan. They saw a savior, a prophet who brought magic back to a world that was becoming dangerously rational. His true story, of course, was much dirtier, but for now, he was Count Cagliostro, the magician of Egypt, and Europe was at his feet, ready to be deceived. But Cagliostro was no soloist. He was the maestro of an opera of deceptions, and his prima donna was his wife, the beautiful and equally enigmatic Serafina. If Cagliostro was the mystical force, the thunder and the mystery, Serafina was the earthly allure, the seductive bait that made the hook irresistible. Together, they were a perfectly balanced machine of deception. Serafina, whose origins were as obscure as her husband's, both in fact were Sicilians of humble birth, was presented as a spiritual princess, a pure soul capable of communing with the ethereal. Her beauty was not merely physical. It was a beauty cultivated to appear supernatural, with large melancholy eyes and a posture of fragile grace. In the salons of high society, while Cagliostro discoursed on alchemy and the secrets of the universe, Serafina glided among the guests. She read palms, her lingering touch sending shivers down the arms of bored marquises and duchesses. She didn't predict the future. She validated desires. She told an elderly noblewoman that her beauty was still noticed, a bankrupt baron that fortune was near. She was the psychologist, the confidant. Cagliostro sold the spectacle. Serafina sold intimacy. They used charisma as a weapon. He was the stern, all-powerful father. She was the understanding, gentle mother. Together, they created a network of contacts that was not accidental, but meticulously constructed, one aristocrat seduced at a time. They didn't knock on doors. They were invited, begged. The nobles saw in them not just entertainment, but a form of distinction. Having Count Cagliostro in one's salon was the height of social fashion. The couple understood the psychology of the elite. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a better story. And Cagliostro and Serafina were the best storytellers in all of Europe. The stage was set for these miracles. Cagliostro began to perform what he called magical operations, seances that became a sensation in Paris. These were not amusement parks. They were exclusive events, held in dark rooms with an atmosphere heavy with incense and expectation. The ritual was always the same. Cagliostro would introduce his medium, whom he called Dove, or Dove. It was almost always a small child, preferably a virgin girl, whom he claimed was pure enough to see the spiritual world. These children, probably trained, intimidated, or even hypnotized, would enter a supposed trance. They would then begin to speak in thin, ghostly voices, claiming to be angels, nature spirits, or, most coveted, deceased relatives of the patrons present. Marchionesses wept upon hearing the voice of their dead sons. Battle-hardened generals sought advice from ancestral spirits. Cagliostro orchestrated everything, interpreting the child's ramblings as profound prophecies. Beyond the spiritual, there was the physical. He sold his elixirs of long life. These were bottles of colored liquids, with mystical labels, sold for fortunes. What did they contain? Probably a mixture of wine, bitter herbs, and perhaps, for added effect, laudanum or metallic compounds. He presented them as first matter from the alchemists, the substance capable of reversing aging. He also performed miraculous cures. He didn't cure smallpox or tuberculosis. He cured the diseases of the elite: melancholy, hysteria, gout, boredom. He used techniques of animal magnetism, popularized by Franz Mesmer, making theatrical passes with his hands over patients, staring intently into their eyes. The power of suggestion, combined with the desperate desire to believe, did the rest. The cured proclaimed his miracles, and the legend of Cagliostro grew daily, making him immensely wealthy. But Cagliostro's ambition went beyond false cures and expensive elixirs. He sought power. He realized that the true elite of Europe was connected by an invisible network: Freemasonry. It was the social and intellectual club of the time, a secret fraternity that united nobles, philosophers, and generals. But Cagliostro saw a flaw. For some, regular Freemasonry was too rational, too tied to the Enlightenment. It lacked magic, so he invented his own. He founded the Egyptian rite of Freemasonry. It wasn't just another lodge. He claimed it was the true Freemasonry, the original source of all wisdom, supposedly founded by the priests of ancient Egypt and transmitted through the ages. It was a stroke of marketing genius. It attracted members of the elite and, crucially, even high-ranking clergymen, men of the church who felt their own faith had become cold and logical. Cagliostro offered them Freemasonry with mysticism. The initiation rituals were theatrical spectacles. Candidates were blindfolded, led through reflection chambers decorated with skulls, took blood oaths, and underwent symbolic tests of loyalty. Cagliostro mixed Masonic symbols with alchemy, Kabbalah, astrology, and a heavy dose of invented hieroglyphs. Scandalously, he allowed women to join, creating adoption lodges where Seraphina presided as the Queen of Sheba. This broadened his appeal and his power base. And of course, there was the money. The Egyptian rite was not cheap. Initiation fees were exorbitant. There were fees for each degree, for special amulets, for sacred manuscripts that he himself wrote. He wasn't just selling spiritual enlightenment, he was selling exclusivity and ultimate secrecy, building a financial empire based on membership fees and the credulity of the wealthy. And it was this network of power that led him to his ultimate prize, his greatest victim, Cardinal Louis-René Edouard de Rohan. Cardinal de Rohan was, without exaggeration, one of the most powerful men in France. A prince of the church, a member of one of the oldest and richest families in the country, he had everything. Everything, except one thing: the favor of Queen Marie Antoinette. Due to a series of diplomatic blunders and his reputation for debauchery, the Queen publicly despised him. For Rohan, a man of immense pride and political ambition, this rejection was an open wound, an obsession that consumed his days and nights. He was desperate to return to the good graces of the court, to feel the warmth of royal favor. And despair, as Cagliostro well knew, is the most fertile ground for the charlatan. The Count was introduced to Rohan and immediately perceived the cardinal's weakness. He offered no political advice. He offered magic. Cagliostro became Rohan's closest confidant his private guru. He held exclusive seances for the cardinal. In these shadowy meetings, the spirits and angels channeled by Cagliostro conveniently spoke about the cardinal. They said that the queen's guardian angel was beginning to look favorably upon him, that his devotion would be rewarded. Cagliostro even performed magical visions using clairvoyant techniques, probably a hidden assistant or a trick of mirrors, to show Rohan an image of Marie Antoinette in a basin of water, smiling at him. The cardinal, blinded by his desire, believed everything. He poured an unimaginable fortune into Cagliostro's hands, funding the Egyptian rite, buying elixirs, and paying for exorbitantly expensive rituals to secure the queen's favor. Cagliostro had a prince of the church in his pocket, and with him, unlimited access to the wealth and power of the French state. Rohan's blind trust, fueled by Cagliostro's magic, would soon lead him, and Cagliostro, to the center of the greatest scandal of the century, an event that would tarnish the reputation of the monarchy and help ignite the flames of the French Revolution. It was the infamous affair of the diamond necklace. The mastermind behind the scheme was not Cagliostro, but a shrewd swindler named Jean de la Motte, an illegitimate descendant of the nobility. Jean knew of Rohan's obsession with the queen. She also knew of a spectacular diamond necklace composed of 647 stones, priced at £6 million, the equivalent of billions today, which the jewelers Baumer and Bassange were desperately trying to sell to the queen, who had refused it. Jean approached Rohan, claiming to be a secret confidant of Marie Antoinette. She told him that the queen secretly desired the necklace but could not buy it publicly, and that she wanted it. Rohan he would act as her intermediary. If he did, she would pay him, and her favor would be guaranteed forever. Rohan was hesitant, but Jean arranged a nighttime meeting in the gardens of Versailles with a prostitute disguised as Marie Antoinette, who gave Rohan a rose and some words of encouragement. Rohan was almost convinced. The final blow came from Cagliostro. The cardinal, in a panic, consulted his mystic master. Cagliostro, seeing an opportunity for more influence and perhaps a share of the profits, held a séance. His spirits confirmed the queen truly desired the necklace, and Rohan should proceed. That was all the cardinal needed to hear. He signed the papers, took the necklace, and handed it to Jean, who promptly dismantled it and began selling the diamonds in London. When the first payment to the jewelers failed, they went directly to the queen. The scandal exploded. The queen was furious at having her name involved. King Louis XVI, seeing the honor of the monarchy dragged through the mud, acted swiftly. The fall was as swift as the rise had been meteoric. The king, enraged, disregarded the details. He saw betrayal and an intolerable insult to his wife. He issued lettres de cachet. Royal arrest warrants were issued that did not require trial. In the dead of night, royal guards raided the residences of all those involved. Cardinal de Rohan, a prince of the church, was arrested in his robes to the shock of the entire court. Jean de la Motte was captured, and to the horror of high society, Count Cagliostro and his wife Serafina were also arrested. They were taken to the most feared prison in France, the Bastille. The Bastille was no ordinary prison. It was the grim symbol of the king's absolute and arbitrary power. It was a place from which few emerged, a medieval fortress of cold stone, dampness, and despair. The immortal magician, the man who claimed to possess the elixir of life, was now in a dark, damp cell, with rats for company. His magic had failed. The trial that followed became the spectacle of Europe. It was the trial of the century. Daily pamphlets reported every sordid detail. The courtroom was packed. Cagliostro, however, was not a man who gave up easily. He turned the defendant's bench into his final stage. He did not defend himself as a criminal. He presented himself as a martyr for liberty, a righteous man persecuted by corrupt ministers and jealous enemies. He spoke of his innocence, of his charitable works. He had indeed given some money to the poor, a shrewd public relations investment. and of the secrets of Egypt. The common people of Paris, who already hated the queen, nicknamed Madame Deficit, began to see Cagliostro as a folk hero, a man who dared to deceive the corrupt cardinal and embarrass the court. The verdict shocked the king. Cardinal de Rohan was acquitted, a humiliating slap in the face of the monarchy. Jean de la Motte was condemned to be branded and imprisoned. And Cagliostro? He was acquitted of the charge of theft. There was no proof that he had touched the necklace or received money from it. His guilt was moral, mystical. The audience outside erupted in applause. Cagliostro was carried on the shoulders of the crowd like a hero. But King Louis XVI would have the last word. An absolute monarch doesn't need a guilty verdict to punish. On the same day of his acquittal, Cagliostro received a royal order. He was perpetually banished from the Kingdom of France. It was a humiliating expulsion. He was escorted to the border like a common criminal. France, his golden goose, was lost forever. He tried to re-establish himself in London, but his reputation preceded him. The affair of the necklace had exposed his mystical frauds to the world. The English newspapers, free from French censorship, openly ridiculed him, calling him a charlatan and a swindler. His wealthy followers abandoned him. His money began to run out. Desperate, he wandered through Europe, a ghost of his former self. And then, in an act of monumental arrogance or stupidity, he decided to try his luck in Rome. Rome, the heart of the Catholic Church, the seat of the most powerful and feared institution of the time, the Holy Inquisition. He believed he could charm the Pope as he had charmed the Cardinal. He founded a new Egyptian Rite Lodge, right under the Vatican's nose, a fatal provocation. In Rome, Cagliostro's luck finally ran out. The Inquisition was not a bored French nobility. They weren't interested in mystical entertainment. They hunted heretics. They observed Cagliostro, not with admiration, but with clinical suspicion. They didn't arrest him immediately. They used their most effective tactic, infiltration. An Inquisition spy joined Cagliostro's Egyptian Rite Lodge, participated in the rituals, listened to the heretical doctrines, and noted every blasphemy. When they had enough evidence, they acted. In December 1789, Cagliostro was arrested. But this time, it wasn't the Bastille. It was Castel Sant'Angelo, the Pope's fortress prison. And the interrogators weren't secular judges. They were theologians trained to extract confessions. Serafina was also arrested. And here, confronted with the terror of torture and the threat of being burned at the stake as a heretic, their lifelong partnership crumbled. The inquisitors offered Serafina a deal: confess everything, betray her husband, and she would only be sentenced to life imprisonment in a convent. She accepted. The woman who had been his Queen of Sheba, his accomplice in every deception, betrayed him devastatingly. She testified against him, revealing every lie, every parlor trick, every invented ritual, every financial fraud. She painted a portrait of him not as a mystic, but as a servant of Satan, a swindler who mocked God. With his wife's testimony, Cagliostro was finished. The trial was secret, but the verdict was public and terrible. Guilty of heresy, witchcraft, blasphemy, and founding a Masonic organization. The sentence: death. The bonfire was already being prepared. But Pope Pius VI, perhaps fearing that the public execution of such a notorious figure would turn him into a martyr, commuted the sentence. It was not an act of mercy. It was an act of calculated cruelty. The death penalty was changed to life imprisonment, to be served in the fortress of San Leo. This was no ordinary place. It was an impenetrable fortress, built atop a rocky mountain with steep sides, accessible only by a single narrow path. It was the Pope's maximum security prison, reserved for the worst heretics. The man who called himself Count Cagliostro was taken there in chains, and it was here that the Inquisition delivered its final blow. They publicly revealed his true identity to the world. He was not an Egyptian nobleman. He was not immortal. He was Giuseppe Balsamo, a petty swindler, forger, and fugitive from justice, born into poverty in Palermo, Sicily. The great magician was just a common criminal. In St. Leon, he was not placed in a normal cell. He was confined to the well cell a dark, damp hole carved into the rock, without windows, with only a small opening in the ceiling through which food was lowered and waste removed. It was a living tomb. The man who had dined with cardinals and charmed royalty now lived in complete darkness, alone, amidst his own filth. Accounts say he went mad, screaming against his captors, alternating between blasphemies and pleas. The immortal slowly decayed. He died in 1795, after years of solitary confinement, a victim of a stroke. The greatest impostor of the 18th century, the man who personified the dreams and follies of his time, died as he was born, a nobody, swallowed by darkness. If you were moved by this story, please like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what you liked most. Your opinion is very important to us. Share this video with someone who needs an inspiring story. Until next time.